I've never been the kind of guy who cared much about appearances. My life wasn't flashy, and it wasn't supposed to be. I worked long hours at my job, poured my energy into building a career I could be proud of, and saved every penny with a clear purpose. My apartment reflected that. It was small, just a one-bedroom tucked away on the third floor of an older building. The walls had a few scratches, the furniture wasn't anything to brag about, and the kitchen barely had enough counter space for a coffee maker and a cutting board. But it was mine. Every bill, every stick of furniture, every late-night meal cooked on that tiny stove, I had earned it all myself. That was something I valued. Independence. I didn't need anyone's money, anyone's approval. I lived modestly, not because I had no ambition, but because I had bigger goals on the horizon. I wasn't spending my savings on marble countertops or luxury cars. Instead, I was focused on something more important: stability, freedom, and building a life that couldn't be taken away from me. When I met Emma, I thought she understood that about me. She was beautiful. Warm smile, confident posture, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and command attention without even trying. At first, she seemed genuine. She laughed at my dry jokes, asked about my goals, and listened with interest when I spoke about the projects I was working on at my job. I thought, maybe, just maybe, I had found someone who valued me for who I was. But over time, little things started to show. Emma always talked about her friends' new apartments, the gifts their boyfriends bought them, or the fancy dinners they were taken to on weekends. I noticed how her eyes lit up whenever she scrolled through social media, pointing out engagement rings or designer handbags. It wasn't that she said anything outright, it was subtle at first. A raised eyebrow when she saw my plain watch. A little smirk when I mentioned I preferred cooking at home instead of going to expensive restaurants. I brushed it off, convincing myself she was just different from me. After all, opposites attract, right? I figured my simplicity balanced her taste for finer things. I told myself that if I just stayed true to my values, she'd see the bigger picture. She'd see that real happiness wasn't built on money or appearances, but on trust, effort, and love. And for a while, I believed it. I believed she cared about me, the man, not the paycheck. That maybe I had found someone who could share both my present and my future. What I didn't know then was that Emma's smile, as warm as it looked, hid something colder underneath. Something that would reveal itself the day she finally stepped foot into my apartment. The first time Emma came over to my apartment, I was nervous, but in the excited kind of way. I had cleaned the place top to bottom the night before, made sure the sheets were fresh, even put out a candle I'd been saving for special occasions. I wanted her to feel comfortable, to see that while my apartment wasn't big or glamorous, it was mine. It was a space built with honesty and hard work. But the moment she stepped through the door, I saw her expression change. Her smile faltered for just a second, replaced by a quick flicker of surprise, then amusement. "This is it," she said, her voice carrying that sharp edge disguised as a joke. She walked a slow circle, taking in the small living room, the plain couch, the second-hand coffee table. I mean, wow, cozy, really? Cozy. I tried to laugh it off even though my stomach tightened. Yeah, it's not much, but it does the job. It's close to work, and I don't need much space right now. She raised an eyebrow and tapped the edge of my coffee table with her manicured nail. "This thing looks like it's one sneeze away from collapsing. Did you pick it up off the side of the road?" She chuckled at her own joke and then wandered into the kitchen. "Oh my God, look at this stove. It's tiny. Do you even fit a pot on here?" Her laughter rang through the apartment like nails on glass. I wanted to shrink into the walls, but instead I forced a smile, pretending it didn't bother me. "It's functional. I cook here all the time." Emma turned, her arms crossed, lips curled into a smirk. "Babe, I don't get it. You've been working at that company for years, right? Shouldn't you at least be in a nicer place by now? Like, don't you want something better?" The words hit harder than I expected. I knew my apartment was small. I knew it wasn't impressive. But the way she said it, like living here was something to be ashamed of, cut deep. She flopped onto the couch dramatically, bouncing against the cushion. "This thing is so lumpy. No wonder you never invite people over. I wouldn't either." I stood there, frozen, my hands gripping each other behind my back. A part of me wanted to defend myself, to tell her about the nights I'd skipped going out so I could save more, about the sacrifices I was making for something bigger down the line. But another part of me just went quiet. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing she'd gotten under my skin. After a long pause, she sighed and looked at me with thinly veiled disdain. "You're a great guy, but honestly, this?" She waved her hand around the room like she was swatting away a fly. "It's just not enough for me. I need more than this life." Her words hung in the air like smoke. Not enough. That was what she thought of me. Not enough. And in that moment, as I stood there in my own home, I had never felt smaller. For days after Emma's visit, her words echoed in my head. Not enough. I replayed them over and over, lying awake in my small bedroom, staring at the ceiling. I wanted to believe she hadn't meant it the way it sounded, that maybe she'd just been nervous or trying too hard to joke. But deep down, I knew better. She had laughed at my life, laughed at the effort I had poured into building something from the ground up. Still, I tried to brush it off. I told myself every couple had rough patches, that I could somehow prove to her I was worth more than square footage and shiny countertops. But each time we met after that, the cracks widened. Emma started talking more about her friends. "Did you see the apartment Jenna's boyfriend rented for her?" she said one night at dinner, scrolling through her phone to show me a glossy photo of a downtown high-rise. 2 bedrooms, granite counters, a balcony with a skyline view. "Now that's living." I forced a smile, stabbing at my food while she kept going. "And Claire? Her boyfriend just bought her a Louis Vuitton bag. $5,000, just like that. Can you imagine? Some guys really know how to spoil their girlfriends." I stayed quiet. What could I say? That I'd been working overtime for months, eating ramen noodles half the week, not because I couldn't afford better, but because I wanted to save for the future. That I was sacrificing short-term luxury for long-term security? She wouldn't understand. She didn't want to. The final straw came one Friday night when we were out with her friends. I had offered to pick up the tab for dinner, even though the bill made my stomach tighten. I placed my card on the tray, but before the server could take it, Emma laughed. "Oh, let him pay. He insists on it," she said to her friends, leaning closer to them with a conspiratorial grin, "even though he still lives in a shoebox apartment." "Isn't that cute?" Her friends laughed, not cruelly, but awkwardly, like they weren't sure if they were supposed to. But Emma's eyes glittered with smug satisfaction. She wanted me embarrassed. She wanted me small. That night, as I walked her back to her place, she made the comment that sealed everything. "You know, I just don't see a future in—" "Well, that," she said, waving her hand as if gesturing to my entire existence. "You're sweet, but I need someone who can actually give me the life I deserve." I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't defend myself. For the first time, I simply looked at her and nodded. "All right," I said quietly, because in that moment I realized something important. Emma had never loved me. She had loved what she thought I could give her. And she was about to learn the hard way that appearances can be deceiving. I didn't need to fight. I didn't need to prove anything. The truth would do that for me. The days after Emma's cutting words, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. For months, I had been trying to convince myself that her materialistic streak was just a quirk, something that didn't really define her. But when she dismissed me like that, my life, my effort, my home, I knew it wasn't a quirk. It was who she was. What Emma never knew, though, was that my little apartment wasn't the whole story. That cramped one-bedroom with the peeling paint and squeaky floorboards, it was never meant to impress anyone. It was simply convenient, a short walk to my office, a quiet place where I could focus, a stepping stone while I worked toward bigger things. The truth was, I wasn't struggling. Far from it. I had been working tirelessly for years, pouring my savings into a business I'd started quietly on the side. What began as a small freelance project had exploded into something I could never have imagined: lucrative contracts, loyal clients, and steady growth. Add to that the inheritance I'd received when my grandfather passed, a sprawling family home just outside the city, and I wasn't just getting by. I was thriving. I just didn't advertise it. Why? Because I wanted someone real. I wanted someone who would stand by me whether I was eating instant noodles in a studio apartment or dining in a 5-star restaurant. Someone who valued the man, not the wallet. That's why I had never flaunted the truth with Emma. I wanted to see if she could love me without the glitter. But Emma had shown her hand. And now the irony was about to slap her in the face. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A mutual friend invited both of us to a gathering, a housewarming party in the suburbs. Emma assumed we'd drive over together. She didn't know the address. She didn't know the house we were pulling up to that night wasn't our friend's, it was mine. I'll never forget the look on her face when we drove through the gates. The driveway curved around a manicured lawn, lights glowing softly against a two-story modern home with glass windows that reflected the night sky. "Wow," she whispered, pressing her face to the window. "This place is incredible. I wonder who owns it." I parked the car, grabbed the keys from the ignition, and simply said, "Me." Her head snapped toward me, eyes wide, lips parting like she'd misheard. "What?" I stepped out of the car and unlocked the front door with my own key. "Welcome to my actual home," I said, holding the door open. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen in shock, her designer heels glued to the driveway. All the smugness, all the condescension drained from her face. The truth she thought she knew about me had just shattered, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Regret. Emma followed me inside, her heels clicking against the polished hardwood floor, her eyes darting from one corner of the house to another. The high ceilings, the sweeping staircase, the open-plan living room that looked out over a landscaped garden, every detail seemed to hit her like a slap. She stopped in the middle of the foyer, her mouth slightly open as though words had failed her. This is yours?" She finally stammered, her voice a hushed whisper. I nodded, casually tossing my keys on the marble counter. "Yeah, been mine for a while." Her eyes widened, scanning the house again as if she needed proof. "But I don't understand. You live in that—" She caught herself, too late, but the word hung heavy in the air. "Shoebox." "That apartment?" I finished for her. "Yeah, it's close to work. Simple. Easy. But it's not the only place I have." She blinked, clearly trying to recalibrate everything she thought she knew about me. Then, in an instant, her expression shifted, shock melting into something softer, almost desperate. She forced a smile and stepped closer, her voice taking on a sweetness I hadn't heard in months. I didn't know," she said, lightly touching my arm. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Babe, this is amazing." "You're amazing. I mean, I always knew you were hardworking, but this changes everything." I raised an eyebrow, leaning against the counter, watching her performance. "Does it?" Her cheeks flushed, but she kept going. "Of course." I mean, I was wrong to judge. I was just surprised, you know. I didn't mean what I said back then. I was just being silly. "You have to understand," I almost laughed. The same woman who had sneered at my furniture and humiliated me in front of her friends was now looking at me like I was the prize she had nearly lost. It was almost pathetic, the way her eyes glittered with sudden affection. She reached for my hand, squeezing it. "We can move in here, right? I mean, this is where we belong. Imagine the parties, the dinners, the trips we could take. I could help you decorate, make it perfect." I gently pulled my hand away. "Emma," I said calmly, "you laughed at me. You mocked me. You made me feel small in my own home. And now suddenly you love me because you saw some walls and a fancy staircase?" Her smile faltered. "No, it's not like that." "It's exactly like that," I interrupted. My voice wasn't angry. It was steady, almost amused. "And that's the difference between you and me. I don't need to prove my worth with things. I know who I am, but you only see value when it's wrapped in money." Her lips trembled, and for once, Emma had no comeback. She just stood there, staring at me, regret and panic flickering across her face. I walked to the door and opened it wide. "You wanted more than me, remember? You should go find it." The silence that followed was heavier than any insult she had ever thrown at me, and for the first time since I met her, I felt taller than she could ever make me feel small. When the door shut behind Emma that night, I stood in the quiet of my home, listening to the echo of her footsteps fading away down the driveway. For the first time in months, I felt a strange kind of peace wash over me. Not because I had won, but because I had finally let go of something that was never real to begin with. Emma had never loved me. She had loved the idea of what I could give her, or worse, the idea of what I wasn't giving her yet. All those months I had doubted myself, wondering if I was good enough. I realized the truth. My worth had never been tied to square footage, furniture, or cars. It had always been there, in the sacrifices I made, the work I put in, and the values I refused to compromise. In the weeks that followed, Emma tried reaching out. A text here, a late-night call there. Each time her words were sweeter, softer, dripping with regret. "I miss you." I didn't mean it. "Can we just talk?" But I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She had shown me who she really was, and once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. Life moved forward quickly after that. I poured even more energy into my business, watching it grow stronger each day. But more importantly, I allowed myself to be open to people who valued character over cash. Not long after, I met someone new, someone who didn't care if we were eating takeout on the floor or dining in a high-end restaurant. With her, laughter came easy and respect was never conditional. Emma, on the other hand, faded into the background. I'd hear bits and pieces through mutual friends, how she was still chasing after men with deep pockets, how those relationships never lasted, how she always seemed to end up disappointed. Maybe she never understood why. Or maybe she did deep down but just couldn't admit it. Either way, her regret was hers to carry. I didn't need to gloat, and I didn't need revenge in the way people imagine it. My life itself, the truth she had mocked and then tried to crawl back to, was enough. Looking back, I'm almost grateful she laughed at me that day in my apartment. Because her laughter revealed everything I needed to know. It showed me that love built on appearances isn't love at all. It's a transaction, and I wasn't interested in living my life as someone else's investment. So I moved on, stronger, wiser, and freer than before. Emma laughed at my small apartment. She thought it was a punchline, proof that I wasn't enough, but in the end, she was the one who walked away empty-handed, because she laughed at my apartment. But the joke was on her.